It's now my privilege to introduce our main speaker who comes to us from the Glass House Group. Please welcome Arlie.
I want to thank Tim for inviting me over in this group, for having me. I'm really honored to be here, and I am enjoying the enthusiasm. This is really something I'm so grateful to be a part of. I think about all the folks that have been helped by this group, and there's been, we don't keep track and we don't keep score, and if we did, I'd be down the tubes. But, there's an awful lot of people that have been helped, and there's a lot of people to be helped, and that's the reason we get to be here tonight. And the lights are on, and the doors are open, and the life-saving message is available, and it's not restricted, and anyone can stop by. And that's what happened to me. I just got to stop by. I know you're going to celebrate your 6-year anniversary coming up here in July, I believe, and you get to do some work with folks that can't come to meetings in this room, and I've done some of that last time I went to the federal prison out in Fort Worth there, and that door locked and another door locked, and I've never been locked in that tight. But I got out, so that was nice. You know, when we read how it works, it talks about how that we're naturally incapable of grasping and developing a manner of living which demands rigorous honesty. And I think about honesty, and I was the most dishonest person you could ever find when I got here. And so that's one of the things that I've got to learn, not overnight, but it was a process, and I think each one of us is in this process in some way or another. And my name's Arlie. I'm an alcoholic.
Hi, Arlie.
And I'm going to always be an alcoholic, and my life's unmanageable by me, whether I'm either drunk or sober. I've got the obsession of the mind and allergy of the body, and if I take that first drink, you just as well start backing up the pickup, because we got to load up some booze, and there's no telling what'll happen to me. But I'm just one of many, and but I believe that God gave us a solution, and I firmly believe in that. My sponsor did tell me, he told me way back a long time ago, he said, you'll never have to be alone while you're in AA, unless you're talking after, in this case, it would be 9:30, so yeah. I'll keep that in mind. I feel like that there's some bad news and good news, but my disease is right here. It's right now. It's present for duty, and I've got that disease that tells me I don't have it. I said, you're not that bad, and I've heard that. My committee tells me that from time to time, and a guy that I sponsor called me last week, and he said, I've been thinking about it. He said, whether I'm really an alcoholic or not. He's got I've sponsored him for 9 years. And I didn't want to hear that from him. And I told him, I said, the Big Book talks about controlled drinking. But I said, you and I don't qualify. I said, what we need is some controlled AA. So I said, I'll see you at the meeting. The good news about that is the solution is right here, right now. It's in this room, and it's within us. And what we get to do is we get to pass that recovery on from one person to the next. And there was a conference theme, and the theme was pass it on. And we don't have classes as such, and we don't. There's nothing professional that goes on as far as I can see, not in my career, but it's just a place where I get to pass my experience on to the next person that would be willing to listen, and that's such a precious event that takes place. Somebody kept the doors open and the lights on until I got here, until we got here, and I'm so grateful for that. Let's take a moment to acknowledge God's presence. Thank you. I'm grateful that you took time out of your day to be here. I think that's it's a gift to me to be here, and I believe that we're making an investment today, and I call it the AA 401 plan. And I haven't heard of any failures as long as we stick with this great book that we've got. My sobriety date's the 6th of January 1994, and I'm grateful for every day of that. My recovery is by the grace of God and Alcoholics Anonymous and folks like you that would take the time to be here with me and be here when I got here. But the action got to be taken by Arlie, and that's I have to do that every day. I've done something to stay drunk every day, and I have to do something to stay sober every day, and I believe in doing the program. But I get to stay here because of a loving God and folks like you. And Christmas on 10 years ago, I was locked myself in a room with the person that's trying to kill me, and I was working at it. And I was locked up in a room with the malt liquor bull and a Smirnoff dragon, and it was just that's where I got to from on my own power. And the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous says each day somewhere in the world recovery begins when one alcoholic talks to another and sharing their experience, strength, and hope. And that's what we're getting to do here tonight. I've heard such an enthusiastic group of folk get up here, and there's nobody here saying, "Oh, it's just not working today," and today has been the worst day of my life. And all I've heard is enthusiasm, because that's what needs to be here is enthusiasm. We've got a new life today. I have got a new life today, and it's because of Alcoholics Anonymous and the God that loved me before I got here. I think that we have to share that responsibility, and we have to continue to pass it on. AA saved my life, and it just keeps saving it one day at a time. And the big book talks about to watch people recover and see them help others, and to watch loneliness vanish, and to see a fellowship grow up about you. To have a host of friends is an experience you must not miss. When I got here, I did not have a host of friends. I didn't bring any people with me when I came in here. And there was a couple of guys that I went to a funeral, and it was an alcoholics funeral, and they looked over at him and said, "Oh, doesn't he look good?" His wife said he ought to. He hadn't had a damn drink in several days. And there's a couple other guys who were making conversation, and they were talking and said, well, they were pretty old, and they said, "Do you suppose they have meetings up there?" I said, "Well, I don't know. Let's make a deal." Said the first one that goes away, said, you send a word back and let the other one know if they have meetings up there. And so the guy was sitting in a meeting a few weeks later, and this message came in, and he said, it's the good news and the bad news. He said, the good news is, yes, they do have meetings up there, but the bad news is you're chairing tomorrow. I think about when I arrived here, and I think about what alcohol had done for me when I arrived here, and it had succeeded in it. It had become my relief, and it started relieving me from my self-respect. And I didn't see that. It was slow and insidious, but my dignity and my security and my shelter and my family and my friends and my worldly goods, and I found myself being outwitted, and I was baffled, and I was powerless over this cunning, baffling, powerful disease that I have. And every place I went, there wasn't anyone saying welcome and come back and have a cup of coffee. The places I was going, why they was saying out, we don't want to see you again. You're too obnoxious. You're too noisy. You don't pay your bill. And so I was just about eliminated to the place where that I couldn't go to the bars. The 2 or 3 bars I went to, I wasn't much of a bar drinker, but they remembered when I was there last. But I drank in the garage. I became a garage drinker, and I was pretty good at that. And I was in that solution. It was called alcohol. I was in the solution, and it had become my master, and I could not drink. And I had a career in the military. I flew on B-52s, and we was flying out over the Sierras one night, and we got a lightning strike, and it shut down all the power in the aircraft. The aircraft was dark. The engines were still running, and the only way that they were feeding was the fuel was being fed by gravity feed. And the pilot called up, and he said, well, they couldn't get the power back on. They'd done what they were supposed to do. And he said, crew, I recommend that you take a look at what you've got. And if you're going to take anything with you, we may have to step out. And he said, I recommend that you get your heavy clothes because we're over the Sierras. And that was a dilemma. Lack of power was our dilemma. And but we're going to need to escape. And the big book on page 45 talks about lack of power was our dilemma. And my power quit working. I needed a new power source. And they should have put a tag on me when I came in the door, hooked it on my ear, and the battery's not included. I was hopeless and helpless, and I had burned all the bridges with the family and the friends, and there was still smoke rolling off those bridges. And as a person, you could have hung another tag on me that said not repairable. And I think about in the military, we used to hang those tags on pieces of equipment we'd take out and send through the repair cycle, but you could have put one on me that was probably not repairable or recycling doubtful. But then I found AA, and that was God's will that I found AA. And I remember the first night, and after the meeting, you said, keep coming back, and there was a sign up there on the podium that said, we care. And I thought, wow, that's probably just party line stuff, I really don't care. And but today I add to whatever else we say, just stay. We need to encourage people to stay with us, because I see so many people that stop, and I call it, on the aircraft, we used to call it a touch and go. It really wasn't going to land. We just acted like we were going to land. We touched down, and when we took off again. And that makes me feel sad that we can't, that everybody can't stay. And I've heard other folks say that if all the people that needed Alcoholics Anonymous that came to the meetings, we would have to get the stadium, And so I guess we're just a very fortunate few people. I had a military career, and I knew that when I seen instructions, I needed to follow those instructions. That was very important. And there was a time in my life, the only time I followed instructions was when all else failed. And I finally got to the place where instructions didn't mean anything to me anyway. And I had a wife, and I had a family. And they begged me, Dad, please don't drink so much. And I said, I won't. And of course, I could not drink. We were flying with a new navigator one time, and there's a young guy just out of navigator training, and he was smart. He'd been to the academy, and he'd been to the Air Force Academy, and so what they do is their positions were down in the lower deck of the B-52, and they had all this fantastic equipment. You could just press a button and it'd take you to wherever, and you put the longitude and latitude of the world point where you wanted to go, and it'd take you there. But they wanted him to know how to do it if everything failed, and so they'd let him navigate, and the pilot would point at the instrumentation, and he kept doing like this. We're getting farther and farther off track, and he wasn't supposed to talk to him. He was supposed to let him do it himself. And he called down there and says, Nav, so this is a pilot, says, give me a position report. And there was just dead silence. And pretty soon it says, pilot says this, and Nav says, I don't know where we are, but we are on time. And that's what I think about Alcoholics Anonymous. I was on time. If I'd have got there sooner or later, I don't know what the situation would have been. I think about God's logistics plan, and that's a plan where things have to be in place at a certain point and at a certain time. And I think about my life, how that everything was just exactly where it needed to be. When I got to Alcoholics Anonymous, I was lost. I was really lost. I was just in despair. And kind of like that drunk in the corral that was holding the rope. He didn't know if he'd lost a horse or found a rope. And but you all threw me that rope, and you threw me the lifeline. And Big Book talks about we in our turn sought the same escape with all the desperation of drowning men. What seemed to be at first a flimsy reed has proved to be the loving, powerful hand of God. A new life has been given us, or if you prefer, a design of living that really works. And that's the power, and that's the gift, and that's the miracle in my life. I was talking about instructions, and the Big Book talks about that too. It says, to show other alcoholics precisely how we have recovered is the main purpose of this book, and we hope for them that these pages will prove so convincing that no further authentication will be necessary. And I sponsor a guy that he's had a list of things that he felt it was necessary for him to do, other than what I'd ask him to do, and he. One of them was to understand God. And I said, well, circle that one, because that's going to take a while. And we could get self-help books and do a lot of research and so forth, but the thing that I've found that works so well is just follow the instructions. The proof is in this room. The solution is in this room. And I don't need to ask any further questions. And as I got to sit in AA, I knew that you all had something that I needed to have. And that was one of the convincers for me. This guy was out driving around the country, and he found a pig. He's in his pickup and looked around. There wasn't any fence or anything. The pig was just there, and so he put it in the back of his pickup, and he drove to all these houses and asking, is this your pig? And he said, no, it's not. So he took it back to town, and the cop stopped and said, what are you doing with that pig in the back of your pickup? And he said, well, I can't find the owner. He said, well, take it to the zoo. And so the next day, he's seen that guy driving around. That pig was in the front seat. He said, the cop stopped him again. He said, I thought I told you to take that pig to the zoo. He said, I did, and we had so much fun, now we're going to Six Flags. I had 3 or 4 meetings after I got into AA, and I was out of alcohol. I was starting to sober up a little bit. And my defense mechanism was alcohol, and it was starting to go away. I didn't want to look at me, and I had that bare bundle of wires up here in the wiring harness in my head, and the smoke was starting to roll out my ears, and didn't have any insulation left. And I had been running from me for years. The Big Book says I was in full flight from reality, and I didn't want to look at me. And another thing the Big Book talks about is I can be defeated by an attitude of intolerance or belligerent denial. I was full of anger. I was really angry that I had to go to some place like this to do something that I should have been able to do for myself. And there was a blacksmith that was working on a horseshoe, and it was red hot, and he had formed it and got it fixed up just like he wanted it, and he threw it out on the ground to dry or to cool down, and this drunk came by and picked it up and put it right back down, threw it back down on the ground, and the blacksmith says, hot, wasn't it? And he said, no, it just doesn't take me long to look at a horseshoe. That was my denial, but what I was in was I was beyond that. I was in delusion, and I was lying to myself and saying, I'm really not that bad, And it's like the funeral the guys went to, and they said, well, what did he die of? I said, he had cirrhosis of the liver. I said, well, why didn't he go to AA? Well, he wasn't that bad. And that was me. I was not that bad. And that guy that I sponsored told me, he said, I don't know if I'm an alcoholic or not. I'm not sure. And the Big Book don't take any off on that. It just talks about the moderate drinker or the hard drinker, and said if circumstances demand, we can give it up, or they can give it up. And I had been given a lot of chances to give it up. And my ex-wife gave me a lot of chances, and the children, and my commander, and my boss, and the corporation. I worked in a corporation, and he said, maybe you ought to get some help, And they got those things like, what do they call the help things that people get nowadays? But anyway, they had help available, and but it talks about it talks about what about the real alcoholic? And now they've got to run the flag up for me, and it says he may start off as a moderate drinker, he may or may not become a continuous hard drinker, but at some stage of his drinking career, he begins to lose all control of his liquor consumption once he starts to drink, and that was me. I find myself in that Big Book many a times. I was in delusion, and delusion is a false belief regarding oneself that persists despite the facts. And we were flying in Vietnam, and we got hit. We didn't get hit by the SAM, but it exploded nearby, and we took up a bunch of flak, and we had some fire, and we were able to take care of it. But when I got to Alcoholics Anonymous, my life was on fire, and I didn't know what to do about it. And the book talks again, the delusions that we're like other people or presently may be has to be smashed. We alcoholics are men and women who have lost their ability to control our drinking. And we know that no real alcoholic ever recovers control over any considerable period. We get worse, never better. And I stopped. 5 years before I got to Alcoholics Anonymous, my ex-wife-to-be was telling me, said, you just can't stop drinking, can you? And I said, yes, I can. And I gritted my teeth and grabbed onto something. And she said, for 1 year? And I said, yes, I can. And I'll tell you what, I've had some time in my life, but that was the most miserable 1 year that I ever had in my whole life, and I don't ever want to go back that way. But what I was suffering from was untreated alcoholism. And my kids even said, Dad, you need a beer, and I can't have one. I was starting to get some help. I didn't start out that way. I didn't start out that way to become an alcoholic, and it just slowly and studiously slipped into my life, and I got to the place where my financial situation wouldn't allow me to buy as much as I wanted to drink, so I started making it, and I'd done a pretty good job with that. And it finally got to the place where I couldn't make it fast enough for me, so that should have been a flag. My dad was an alcoholic, and I didn't want to end up like him. I seen all the destruction that the alcohol caused on our family, and I watched him die an alcoholic death. And I said, I'll never be like that. And I was drunk at his funeral, and I was almost as bad as my dad. That's what I think about was God was taking care of me back a long time ago when I couldn't or would not take care of myself. I was in that place that Tim talks about at the glass house back here in that corner. It's still kind of dark, and it hadn't changed much. And I call that the dare me to get sober row. But we see the people sit back there, and they sit back there for the same reason I sit there. I sure didn't want to sit on the front row. my first meeting, and I learned that I could sit back there and I could escape early, and I wouldn't have to talk to all these people, and I could come in late, and nobody would say too much. But this guy came up to me, and I think he's seen my red eyes. They were still glowing in the dark. I think my eyes had been red for years, and he come up and he said, "Do you have a sponsor?" And of course, I didn't know what the answer was for that, and I said, "No, I didn't have one." I wanted to lie, and he said, "Well, I'll be your temporary sponsor." And I didn't know what that was going to entail, so he said, "Meet me at the noon meeting tomorrow." And he had some authority in his voice, so I thought, well, I understand it, I can do that. But he said, and he was set up front, and he said, "Sit up here by me." And I did that. He said, "You can't hear back there." And so he had some marching instructions for me, and I knew I'd been in the military. I knew how to do that. And he said, "Be here every day at noon and meet me. Get here a little bit early because I'd be wanting to talk to you." And he said, "By the way, do you have a relationship with God?" And I said, "No." I said, "It's been quite a while since I've had any conversation with God." And he said, "Well, I just talked to him this morning." He said, "You can believe that I believe." And he said, "That'll work for a while." And he told me to in the morning, he said, "If you can't pray to God, just say help." And he said, "I'll tell you what to read." He said, "Then call me." And he told me what time to call him at 10 minutes to 6. And, I was retired. 10 minutes to 6. That was 0610 military time. Anyway, and then he said, "Meet me at the noon meeting." And he said, "And when you get through in the evenings," he said, "if you haven't drank, just say thanks." And he said, "That'll work." And that basically is still the same thing that works today. Those were the basic principles. And the folks that I get to work with, I tell them this is what we're going to do. And I have good lineage from that sponsor. His sponsor was one of the guys that was a charter member of the Glass House that helped start it. And the guy is a federal judge, and he's highly looked up to by quite a few folks. So the lineage is working pretty good as far as what's been passed down, and I can't pass on any more than that, or any less than that, really. So I'm satisfied with the sponsor that I have. I still have that same sponsor today, except that the only thing that's changed, I get to call him at 5 minutes till 7. If I call him at 4 minutes to 7, the hairdryer's running, and he's not happy because he had to shut the hairdryer down. That's just, he probably wouldn't want me to say that, But one of the things that he told me is, in that 90 meetings in 90 days, is we're going to start taking the steps. And I'd heard other people talk about working the steps, and he said, we're going to take the steps. And to me, what I got from that was that when I got to that step where I was comfortable with it, it was my step. And now that's my step, and I feel that I took that step. And but for a long time there, I still had the obsession to drink alcohol. And I guess my gears are grinding, and I say, well, the solution to that is because I drank for so long that I didn't get relieved from the alcohol. I had to suffer a little bit. But I was in a non-denominational church one Sunday morning about 6 months after I got to Alcoholics Anonymous, and I felt something change. And I felt the power that I'd felt when I was a young person in the Pentecostal church, and the power was on in that church. And but I felt like that I felt some of that same power, and the obsession was gone. And what I was doing was I kept a quart of Smirnoff in the trunk of my car in case I decided to defect. And I didn't want to drive 2 blocks to the liquor store. So anyway, I got to get rid of the Smirnoff, and I thought, boy, this is it. I'm there. I don't have that desire to drink. I didn't have to hang on to the chair. Didn't have to grit my teeth. And I come to find out that was just the tip of the iceberg. And now we're going to have to start dealing with me. And I have alcoholism, I, self, and me. And found out the alcohol was just a symptom. And I had went for a long, long time. I didn't know how to live. I thought I did, but it didn't. And I needed to learn how to live this new life. I had hurt so many people around me in my professional life and in my family life. In the big book it talks about without help it is too much for us, and probably no human power could have relieved us or me from my alcoholism, and I needed help. And I thought, where am I going to get this help? I got this sponsor, but he's not telling me the secrets. And thing I found out was that I learned the secrets in the fellowship. It wasn't secrets; it was how God was working in your life, and the proof that He was doing things in your life. And that I needed the God that you talked about, and I needed the AA principles, and I needed a good sponsor, and these things were starting to come together. And I thought, I'm only going to stay here for a little while longer because I think I got it. And the longer I stayed, the more I found out that this was where I needed to be. These were the kind of people that I needed to be around, because you're the only folks that would, with somebody like Chris, and he's celebrating 1 year sober, and we celebrate 1 day sober, and it's the only place that we celebrate people has had such a bad life before they got here, and we're celebrating that. And but what we're celebrating is the change that takes place in the lives, and. But I found out that I've got a fatal disease and it has to be taken care of. And the B-52 ejection seat's got a big warning up there. It says ejection sequence must be initiated in order or fatality will follow. And that's what, that was pretty firm. But I've got a fatal disease, and if I don't follow some instructions, and like my sponsor told me, he said, we're going to take them in sequence. Sequence meant something to me, but we got to take care of that fatal disease. And Sandy Beach talked about one time. He says his sponsor told him, says, in the big book says to either take up a spiritual way of life or die an alcoholic death. And he said, tell me a little bit more about that alcoholic death. Maybe I can work this out. But the big book provides a beautiful path to follow, and it gives me 12 principles to accept and live by, and it's a design for living. It works, and it says it works even in rough going, and it's my personal book of instructions, and I call it my owner's manual. And this is a beautiful owner's manual, and I bought an old MG. I was drunk, and I was out at the junkyard, and I said, I'll take that one. It was an MG that was wore out, it was rusted out, and it just had been sitting there for 5 years with no top on it, and that's the one I want. I'd helped my son restore one, and I wanted one like his, but I didn't want to have to pay the money for it, so I didn't pay the money for it. But I had to get a book of a maintenance manual for it, and I had to get a book of instructions on how to do things. And those Brits, they do things different than what we do, and so I had to learn how to do things different. That's what I get to do in ANA, yeah, in Alcoholics Anonymous is I get to do things different, and. Today, I get to read the owner's manual, and one of the things I get to do is obey the unenforceable. When I was in the military, and when you were on any time I was in the military, but in flight, you'd get a call from FAA, so change altitude from 32,000 feet to 34,000 feet, and you didn't question that. We like it here. No, you didn't question that. You just went ahead and changed altitudes, and then pretty soon you'd look down and there was somebody else coming right below you. So there was a reason for that. A lot of people I've talked to and worked with, they've had to ask for reasons for why are we doing it this way, and I have a hard time with that sometimes. But we're going to do it this way. There's a guy went to the doctor and he said. He gave him an examination and done some tests and so forth. Said, we're going to do some surgery, and you're going to have to give up half of your sex life. And he looked around. He said, well, let's see. I wonder what half. Half of either talking about it or thinking about it. I was born in a small town. I was born in Kansas, and it's still stuck to me. But anyway, I finally got out of there, but I spent my early years in small communities, and my dad was a contractor, and very early years he was in the oil business, and my mother got killed in a car accident when I was 5, and Dad, I'd never seen him drink before, and he started drinking, and alcohol took everything. It took the business, it took the money, it took the house, and I just couldn't understand that, why he would drink and let that stuff go, but I do today. And it's just what we do, and alcohol treats us all the same. I really believe that in those respects. But I had a younger brother. Brother passed away about 1.5 years ago, and I have a stepsister. And I was married to the same woman for 40 years. I have 3 children. I got 2 sons and a daughter, and I've got grandchildren. Wow, And I just wonder what it's going to do to me. My ego was crushed when I had to admit that I'm a grandfather. And now there's a possibility I could be a great-grandfather. Wow. But I had a 30-year career with Lockheed, and I had a 30-year career in the Air Force, and I had a 10-year career with Lockheed. And I got divorced from that 40-year marriage. I showed him. And God, at that time, He reassigned me to Alcoholics Anonymous. And I say reassigned is because that's what the military used to do. You didn't just walk in someplace. They said, you're going to be reassigned to Minot, North Dakota. And I believe I've been reassigned to Alcoholics Anonymous. And in the military, you couldn't leave until they give you a new assignment. So I don't think I'm going to get a new assignment, so I'm satisfied with where I am right now. I didn't think I was going to have any opportunity to go to college, and I done real well in high school. I played and lettered in all the sports, and I was on the National Honor Society, and I done real well. But my parents moved away, and my dad I couldn't get along with my stepmother, and so he said, I'm going to board you out. And the people that I boarded with says, your dad hasn't paid your board bill. And so I said, well, I'll go over and tell him, and he'll be over. And I went over, and the house was empty, and they had moved and left me there. And God was taking care of me again. I was a sophomore in high school, and I got a job at a gas station, and I was still able to do the sports and do everything I wanted to do. And I had an old car and got cheap gas, and kept me from siphoning gas, I suppose, But I got to. I had a pretty good life, but I remember my dad, how that he was so abusive, and I said I'll never be like that. But we moved around a lot, but I did get to stay in that same place and finish up high school in all 4 years in one place. But I went ahead and I went into the Air Force, and they trained me in a year-long school in Denver, Colorado. I got this, that was really a neat place. But I got to be in Denver, and they trained me on how to repair bomber radar. And my first station was in Kansas, and I stayed there for 9 years. I was still trying to get out of Kansas. But I did learn one thing in Kansas and I hated it because the wind blew so damn much. And then I got stationed up in North Dakota, and I found out where that wind came from. So I learned something there. And I used to go out and work on the airplane, and I'd see these pilots come out there and the flight crew, and they'd had their little briefcases and their nice flight suits, and they'd get on board and crank engines on an airplane that we'd worked on all night long. And they took off, and then they came back and came off, and they were still looked pretty good shape. And so I thought, well, maybe I can do that. And I put in for flight training. I got accepted, so my first reward in flight training was to go to Minot, North Dakota, and that was wasn't a garden spot much, but my family was young, and it was a good experience. We all stuck together, and the people up there stuck together pretty good. But we started going back and forth to Vietnam, and there was a rule on the aircraft around the aircraft. There's no smoking within 50 feet of the aircraft, and no drinking within 12 hours of flight. And I got those reversed sometimes, and my drinking took off. And I thought, well, if they're going to shoot at us, well, I don't want to be feeling everything when we get hit. And they hit the aircraft in front of us and one in back of us, and it was quite an experience. But I went done a pretty good job in Vietnam, and they reassigned me to a flight school out in California. Got to stay there for 4 years, beautiful assignment, and then they sent me to northern Michigan, to the Upper Peninsula, and that's where it really snows. And by this time I had 2 children in high school and one in the 7th grade, and the wife hated me, the military, and Michigan. And there was lots of insanity and lots of domestic disagreements. And anyway, we went to a house party one night and walked in the door, and the guys were waiting, and they handed me a drink, took my coat, and we're ready to get on some serious drinking. And she said, I suppose you're going to stay here and talk to these guys and drink the rest of the night. And I said, well, yeah, I think I will, And she said, well, I'm not staying. And so she left. And I thought, I got home about 1 o'clock in the morning, and I slept on my usual spot on the couch. And the phone rang at 5 o'clock in the morning. And Saturday morning, I said, man, there must be some trouble someplace. And there was. My wife had stopped by the wing commander's house and was going to tell him all about me. And he just happened not to be home, so she went across the street to the vice wing, the next guy. And that's who she stayed with for 2 hours and told him what a horrible person I was. And I thought, well, he'll just rip my wings off and throw them in the wastebasket when I report to him. And he told me, he said, better get on down here. I need to talk to you. Went down to his office, and we had a half a cup of coffee and talked about news, weather, and sports for about 20 seconds. And he said, so she was at my house. She was telling me all about you last night. My heart was just dropping. And he said, Arlie said, you're going to have to get rid of that bitch. She's going to ruin your career. But I got reassigned to Carswell and over in Fort Worth, and I thought the thing that I needed to do was get stuff. And I had 2 new cars and a fairly new house, and I had 3 teenagers, and 2 of them was heading for college, and things were really taking place at a rapid rate. And then I found out that I was going to have to get a degree if I was going to get promoted, and so I went ahead and started on that. But I was stopping by on the way home from getting my degree in drinking, and finally, I'd come home and there's all this stuff out in the yard. It was my stuff, it was my clothes out in that front yard, and I had to gather it up in my matching luggage, my black plastic bags, and they were oiling the street out in front of the house, and I had some nice shirts. That's when I was working for the corporation, and I dressed nicely every day, and the tire tracks on those shirts never did come out. She threw my stuff in the streets, and that was where no human power could get me sober. She was telling me, she was giving me a message when she was doing that. And anyway, I kept on going, and my last assignment in the military, I worked for a general, and I got treated very, very nicely, and I didn't drink quite as much then. And I graduated from college, and I asked the wife, I said, you coming to the graduation? She said, I'm not going any place with you. I don't want to be seen with you. Still telling me, again, more message. And anyway, I came home and passed out on the couch. I was pretty good about that, and I passed out on the couch, and she wrapped this blanket all around me so that I couldn't go any place, and she beat me up with a ball bat. No human power could beat me sober. So I escaped again, and I had to have the final move out. I knew what I was doing by that time. It took me about 15 minutes, and I was out of the house, and I got a dingy place in the industrial section of Fort Worth, and I was just going to drink myself to death, and at that time, you've seen that poem about footprints in the sand, and there was only one set of footprints, and it had been that way for a long time. But I got a phone, and it had a pager on it, and I'd press the pager and see if the phone would ring, because it wasn't ringing. I wasn't getting any calls from anybody. And anyway, my daughter staked out the liquor store, and she found me and caught me, kind of. And she said, Daddy, we're going to have a Christmas party over at the house, the big house. I call it the big house. We're going to the big house, and the grandchildren are going to open their Christmas gifts. And she said, would you come over? And I said, yes. And she said, but please don't drink. And I said, I won't. And that day came, and I had the packages from Neiman Marcus, and they were Neiman Marcus wrappings, and I was in my coat and tie, and I showed up drunk. I could not drink that day, or any day. And I'll never forget the despair I seen on my daughter's face. And she and my son threw me out in the yard and said, you're just a drunk. We don't ever want to see you again. And there was a window about that wide. I had a moment of clarity. I said, well, how did I get here? They've thrown me away. And I think that was my window of opportunity. And I met an Al-Anon lady at a seminar, and she looked at me, and she just took one look at me and said, you need some help. And anyway, she told me about the glass house, and I found it, and a glass house has got some windows on the back side of it back there, and I drove around it, and I was looking for the drive-through window. I thought if I could just get some information, I can do this myself. But that wasn't the case, and I had to go in, and I prayed the prayer, God, please help me. And I thought I'd just stay for a little while, and I'm still staying for a little while, and I'm glad you gave me a little while, and I'm so glad I get to be in AA. I love AA, and but I was lost way back then. I was lost in the wilderness of alcohol, and I was a throwaway. And I call myself, I'm on the product improvement line, and I'm being recycled, and it's just a process that takes a long time because I was in such bad shape. One of the guys that started our unit over there, his name's Jim Williams, but he said, "You're going through the rock crusher," and that's what I was doing. I was being reshaped, and I had to do that for a while. And I still have to jump in every once in a while and get some rough edges knocked off, and I'm not a smooth product yet. I drank for 36 years, and I wasn't sober in the last 5, and not one day. But I got there, and you just took me in. You didn't ask any questions. You didn't say to fill out this application. How much money do you have? What kind of car do you drive? How much is your house payment? There wasn't any questions asked, and I was glad for that. I belonged to a lot of organizations, and I filled out a lot of petitions, and I paid a lot of money to be in a lot of different places. But this was just come in and be with us. And I found out just over a period of time, and I was just exactly like you all. You all told my story when I heard you talk. Yeah, I've done that. And but I wore this coat and tie when I got there, and there wasn't too many people wearing a coat and tie in that place. And I finally somebody told me, said, you don't have to wear that coat and tie every day. But that's what I wore to work. That was the last thing I remembered wearing, so that's what I wore. And finally I found out that, I wasn't a racehorse. I was just a zebra. So I had to join up with the zebras, and I'm so grateful that I got that opportunity. The big book talks about me, and in no uncertain terms it says what I was like when I got there. And the less people tolerated me, the more I withdrew from society and from life itself. As I became a subject of King Alcohol, shivering denizen of his mad realm, the chilling vapor that his loneliness settled down. It thickened, ever becoming blacker. I sought out sordid places, hoping to find understanding, companionship, and approval. Momentarily I did, and then would come the oblivion and the awful awakening to face the hideous 4 horsemen. Terror, bewilderment, frustration, and despair. I was unable to imagine life either with alcohol or without it. I will know loneliness as few do, and I will be at the jumping off place, and I'll be at the end. I will wish for the end. And that was the place that I found myself before I got through the doors of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I found out that we have that common thread. And I'm an alcoholic, and I have alcoholism, and I'm in the right place. I'm in a safe place today here with you all. I found that unconditional love, and I didn't know anything about that. And I found acceptance and friendship. And when I came in, you all wanted to hug me, and I kept pulling back and pushing away. And I didn't know how to do that. I didn't know how to receive it or give that. And I never hugged my kids. I shook hands with my sons, and I just kind of nodded at my daughter. But what you were doing was way back then. You were getting ready to get me to a place that when God finally gave me, my family was gone, and when He finally gave me those kids and grandkids back, I was able to give them a hug. And now today I've taught them how to do that because they didn't learn it at our house, and I've taught them how to do that. And when I go see my son lives out in Joshua, and I go out and see him, and quite often, and we work on some cars together, and I get there and he gives me a hug, and he says, "Dad, I love you. I'm glad to see you." And then when I get ready to leave, he gives me another hug, and so that was things that was not taking place in my life when I got to Alcoholics Anonymous. And on page 29 it says, further on, clear-cut directions are given showing how we recovered, and how we recovered was to follow through with the steps and to get a sponsor and to be a part of the fellowship. And what I hear in here is you love your home group, and I think that's fantastic. I love my home group. Don't get between me and that door, because I'm going in. I'm going to go to a meeting, and it's kind of the things that I do each day. There's about 5 things that I do, and I think about a big ship that's tied up, and they've got ropes holding that ship, and I've been on some big ships, and when the water's calm, it just sits there, and the ropes are slack, and not really. One of them is not really taut, not holding them. But when the storm comes up and the waves start rolling in, all those ropes start holding, and that's what I think about the 5 things that my sponsor told me I need to do, is I need to do them all. And so therefore I've followed through with that, and it works. I like stuff that works. That really makes me feel good. One of the things that I done when I first got to Alcoholics Anonymous is I had a relationship, and 3 months after I was there, my sponsor he's still in orbit, I think, but a relationship is described as a really exciting love affair turns into outrageous nightmares. Sobriety hangs in peril. And there I was hanging in peril, and I stayed in that relationship for 9 months, and it was another miserable 9 months, and I kept saying, this ain't it. I thought it was, but it wasn't. And anyway, I finally was able to, that finally terminated, and when she told me, she said, if you try to leave, I'll shoot you. and I knew she had a gun, so I survived the ball bat, but I can't outrun bullet. I used to go out and fly, and I had this little book, and I was keeping track of all the stuff, the airplane number, and how many touch and goes we'd done, and what the flight consisted of. And this old colonel come out, and he says, "What are you doing, son?" I said, "I'm keeping track." He said, "You don't have to do that." He said, "There's an office on the base that takes care of all that stuff. You don't have to worry about a thing." And he said, there's only two things that I keep track of, and that's just that the number of takeoffs and landings are equal. One of the things that I really needed to get was faith. I didn't have faith. I could see it working in your life, but I didn't know what was going to happen to me. And I think about faith as a time when we returned to the base at 3 a.m. and the fog was thick and low visibility, and we had fooled around, and they'd sent us to Abilene, and Abilene was the same way, and we couldn't land, so we came back and we started to get low on fuel. And we were going to have to land, and we tuned up the radio and got a hold of air traffic control and said, "Bomber 29, this is air traffic control. Maintain your heading and start a descent to flight level 10,000 feet and contact approach control on 125.3. And Bomber on approach, this is approach control. Continue descent to 2,000 feet. There was a brief delay and said, "This is a final controller. We have you on precision radar. Start descent. No further verbal communication on your part will be necessary. You're 8 degrees right of center line, 500 feet low, correct back. You're on altitude. You're on center line. You're over the runway threshold. Land now." And it was there. And that's what I think about my faith. It's there. AA is here, and a solution is here, and there's no analysis needed, and no further authentication on my part will be necessary. I think about what happened to my dad. I got to watch him pass away, and there was he would change from a loving father to a raging demon with alcohol, and he would be physically abusive and mentally abusive to the family. He was uncaring and irresponsible, and I said I'd never be like that, and I said that early on from when I was very small, but I almost did that, and except that I got to meet you all. And God directs my path, and He directed me to AA, and you all took me in and taught me to be different. And I get to take the steps, and I got to learn how to trust God, and learn how to clean house, and learn how to help others, and love the ones around me. And I still get to help a lot of folks today, and I'm so grateful that you all taught me how to do that. Chris, congratulations. Such a great thing. And thanks for having me.
The format of tonight's meeting is group participation, followed by a short break, followed by our main speaker. We ask that you limit your comments to 2 or 3 minutes so that we can hear from as many people as possible. We also ask, in order to avoid interrupting the meeting and to show respect for those who are sharing, that you turn off all cell phones and pagers and refrain from getting coffee during the meeting. Before we begin participation, I'd like to thank our speaker, Arlie, for coming out to speak for us. All right. Ronnie.
My name's Ronnie Grubbs. I'm an alcoholic.
Hi, Ronnie.
And sobriety date's August 12th, 2002. And Arlie, looking forward to your talk. Thanks for coming down. And happy birthday, Chris. I guess I've been thinking all week about bad deal. Been thinking all week about the home group and the people that I've come to know as close friends, and which is something that I never had really in life. And we went away last weekend on a group getaway, and it was just a real nice time, a good time of fellowship. As we were driving home, my wife and I were in the car and just started talking. And for, I guess, about the first 45 minutes to an hour on the way home, just talked about what we took away from the weekend, and talked about each individual person that we were there with for the weekend, and what we found out about that person that we didn't know. And I look back on all that, and for the first time in my life, I can honestly say I care about other people and want to try to get to know other people. And that is so far removed from the way I used to be. I was a taker all my life. Never cared about anybody but myself, and a bad alcoholic. And to put all that into perspective, I'm just so thankful and grateful for what Alcoholics Anonymous has done for me today. At one time I was the type of alcoholic that, if I know today that if I take a drink, that it'll be just as bad, it'll be worse than it was, before, during my last drink. And, I'm starting to understand and grasp what I suffer from. And it's a scary thing. And it's a scary thing to know that I'm just a few bad decisions away. And that when I start thinking and start doing things my way and not the way that I've been taught in AA, things get bad for me even today. But Alcoholics Anonymous has offered a solution for me to a problem where once I take a drink, it kicks off a phenomenon of craving in me. And I'll never know once I get that first drink into me where I'm going to end up or where I'm going to be or how long that'll be. And even though the alcohol's removed, I still suffer from alcoholism today. My thinker doesn't work. And that's why it's so important for me to remain active and committed to my home group and remain accountable to my sponsor. And most importantly, to always be reaching my hand out to work with another alcoholic. And as long as I do those simple things, get on my knees and pray every day and read my literature and follow those directions that have been real clearly spelled out for me, and, things seem to go well. And life's a whole lot different than it used to be. And I'm just real grateful and thankful for that, more than I know how to express. And I'm just really, really excited to be at a meeting and looking forward to the rest of it. Thanks.
Bruce.
I'm Bruce Hicks, recovered alcoholic, December 29th, 1976.
Hi, Bruce.
Hi, everybody. Congratulations, Chris. I've had several anniversaries, but my favorite one would have to be my first one. And I have to say that when I came up on 1 year, I was in shock to think that I could stay sober, or had stayed sober that long. And after the meeting, I went back to my house. I opened the door, and I was a member of a group about twice this big. And it seemed like everybody from my group was in my house. And it was a surprise party. And the neat thing about that is that a year before that, I didn't have a single friend in the world. And I didn't care about that. I didn't like anybody. I didn't want to like anybody, and I was fine with that. And there I was with more people than I could cram into, a regular big house. So that first year, a lot of things changed. And God has given me a lot of blessings, and a lot of them have been through people. I think people are, the best asset that we can have, friendship, friends that will stand by you. So congratulations.
Steve C.
Steve.
I'm Steve Connor. I'm an alcoholic.
Hi, Steve.
This is my first time behind this podium, so I guess I better get used to it since this will be my home group, because on Monday I get out of Cornell. Yeah. I've been locked up in jail and in Cornell now for over a year, and I look forward to getting out and getting a chance to start my life over. And I just want to say thanks to this group and the people in this group, because a lot of positive things have happened in my life since I've come in contact with these people in this room. And I'm real grateful for that. And I look forward to getting out and learning more about the disease of alcoholism, finding the solution, because I know it's in these rooms. And I'm just grateful to be here. Thank you.
Joel.
Joel.
My name's Joel, and I'm alcoholic.
Hi, Joe.
And I've been sober since early this morning. And through the help of God and this program, I've been able to stay sober since early in the morning, since the 8th of November of 2002. This program has changed my life. It took a long time for me to get it. But when I got to the point where I had been beat to the point that I realized that I didn't have any other options, then I was ready to take some action. And I got a sponsor, and I worked through the steps, and the steps are working in my life every day. It amazes me at what's happened to me in just a short period of time. God is completely changing me. I don't really react to anything like I used to, and things are happening in my life that I know there's no way in the world it could happen because of Joel. It's happened because of God working in my life, and I wouldn't be willing to give that up for anything in the world. I love AA with all my heart, and it saved my life, and it's exactly what I've always been looking for, and I don't plan on going anywhere. This thing is working for me. Thanks.
Doug.
Thanks. My name's Doug Gibbs. I'm an alcoholic.
Hi, Doug.
I've been sober since December 27th of 1999. And Harley, like the motorcycle. Looking forward to your talk. Arlie. I couldn't afford the H. Gotcha. Arlie. Got it. And Chris, happy birthday, bro. I liked Chris from the second I met him. I don't know why. You know, I did. That's not like me. That's great. You know that this program works. You know, it works in your life. And I too have been thinking about the home group. You know, and how much it means to me. You know, that we actually invest in our home group, because everything else could go away, and we've still got our home group. And things like this past weekend are just things that I've never thought were possible that I would enjoy. And I've been thinking a lot about the examples that have come before us, both good and bad, because I for the first time in my life, I hurt my back about a week ago, and I've never had back pain before. And oh my God! And after a weekend getaway and a day at work, finally went to the doctor. And this is just a kind of pain I've never experienced. And I did not know this, but they like to script a lot of narcotics for back pains. And the first one was Vicodin, and the other one was Oxycontin. And I'm thinking, Brett Favre, Rush Limbaugh, and then I remembered Valpy, and I remembered Sean, and I thought, don't even. And he was like, take the prescription, and then if you need it, I'm like, no, just keep it. Don't even, And because of sponsorship direction, I did what he told me to a long time ago, and I went to a doctor and did the history, the medical history, and I didn't lie. And he looked in there and, oh yeah, the alcoholism. Okay, no problem. We'll go another route. And I'm very grateful for that. And I'm looking forward to your talk again. Bye.
Ross.
I'm Ross Cooper, and I'm an alcoholic. Hello. I've been sober since January 16th of 2004. I just caught that. Anyway, I guess I'm still not allowed to think yet, so. So I'm just still following directions, like I've said the last 3 weeks. And that's about it. Thanks.
Chris B.
Krispy Kreme!
My name is Chris Bird. I am an alcoholic.
Hi, Chris.
And I've been sober since December 20th, 1988. Welcome. Look forward to hearing you speak. And happy birthday, Chris. I was listening to a few people talk, and I was reflecting back on my first year anniversary, and I was crazy. I was 21 years old, and yeah, I wasn't doing a lot of things that I had been doing. I was fresh out of the penitentiary, but I was still crazy. I was crazy. I don't think I'd even completed my 4th step yet. So I was, I still had all that stuff inside, and it was just, oozing out of every little crack and cranny it could. It wasn't pretty, And this week out at Cornell, man, that's great. You're getting out, man. That's great. I was there. Me and Steve were on the other side there and speaking. We kind of gave a little short story and then took some questions afterwards. But I was just, as I was talking, I was looking around at the different people, falling asleep, and the guys that were actually paying attention and whatnot. And it was reminded of me, because I have been sitting in the same chair that they had been. That just not a clue, didn't have a clue what those people that while I was, incarcerated, people would come and they'd give you a book, and I'd lost it, of course, and I wouldn't listen, pay attention at all in the meetings. But, I was just reminded of, just how, blessed I am with my life today and where I am. It's amazing. I've actually worked in a jail for a local municipality. And you just don't go from being an inmate to working in a jail on your own power. You just don't. So glad to be here tonight. Thanks.
Steve.
My name is Steve Diner, and I'm an alcoholic.
Hi, Steve.
Sobriety date August 24th, 2001. Arlie, thanks for coming out and speaking for us. And Chris, happy birthday. Man, it's been a good week. I, too, have thought about when I was almost at 1 year a few times. And that story of Amy talking about, the only reason you went out is because you didn't want to have to quit smoking kind of, came up in my mind today. And just thinking about that and there's some truth in that. When I get up close to a year, I get squirrely every time, and I don't, I imagine some of it was. I mean, I know a lot of it was because I wasn't following directions from a sponsor and working the steps, but some of it was that idea of having more responsibility and and who wants to have all this attention at 1 year if you're not doing everything, and so I think that was part of it. But so now when I hear people talking about how they're squirrely at 1 year, I kind of have a new insight to that, but. Anyway, it's like I said, it's been a good week. I was thinking about what along the lines of Chris and Tuesday night and that idea of those guys were asking about sponsorship and just that gratitude and just knowing you'd say it but they don't seem to hear it. I told them that I can guarantee you my way did not work, and if I didn't have a sponsor, I would not have worked the steps the way that he had me work them. I can guarantee you I wouldn't have figured it out on my own. It wouldn't have mattered. And my idea of direct amends does not even come close to direct amends. I think that's you're supposed to do that anonymously and send a big check when you save it up. That's my ideas. Anyway, thanks for letting me share.
Bobby.
Bobby Selman, the alcoholic.
Hi, Bobby.
And been sober since October 14th, 2003. And I'm just here to listen. Thank you.
Timmy.
Daddy, I'm Tim Moore, alcoholic. Sobriety June 14th, 1994. All right, looking forward to hearing your story. Thanks a lot for coming out. Happy birthday, Chris. And, we were talking a bit outside the meeting here before we got started. And I was reminded of what it's like to be a newcomer. Because over at Arlie's group, there's a section in there. They have a big meeting hall. And there's a section back there where it's kind of dark and shadowy. And the newcomers hang out back there because it's close to the door. And they don't get picked on too much. They don't get called on. They can just kind of hang out back there amongst themselves. And, I can just see myself back there, I can just see myself when I was new, and that was the spot that I would want to be drawn towards, because I didn't want to be pulled out for the light. I just wanted to kind of do my own thing and evaluate, check some things out. Maybe not even go in the meeting first. Maybe just go by the meeting the first few times, check it out, then go hang out in the corner. And what it really took is getting in with a sponsor who pulled me out of those shadows, I got there and I kind of revealed a little few things to him, and he just kind of pulled me along, and he did it by giving me little commitments to do, like making regular phone calls, getting to the meetings early, staying late, studying this book, the same basic things we hear in the meeting, but he put it to me in a way that, it was either you do this or I'm not the guy to sponsor you, and I was just tired of sitting in those shadows. And, I thank God we have the direction. And that same night we were talking about Into Action, and I was just got excited talking about my home group, Could we just come back from our weekend? And I just get excited describing my group to somebody else. Because I know any night you come to Into Action group, you're going to get a solid AA meeting. I know that we're solidly based, and you can just show up any night, and you're going to get a good AA meeting. And I'm just glad to be a small part of it.
Mike.
Thanks, Danny. I'm Mike Erickson. I'm alcoholic. July 19th, 87 is my sobriety date, and I'm having a good time tonight. I'm enjoying this thing called sobriety. Welcome, Arlie. Joel, glad you're here, too. Good to see you, Mel. And welcome to, I can't remember your name, but I met you earlier. I promise you I did. And I know you have a name, and I'll learn it soon. But I'm glad you're here. I've sponsored lots of rotten newcomers over the years. Lots of rotten newcomers. And I promise you Chris was just as rotten as every one of them that has ever come in. And I promise you this. The steps will take rotten people and make them whole. And it's not, I'm not being rude by saying they're rotten, because I was rotten when I got here. I was rotten on the inside. I was rotten on the outside. I treated people rotten. I was a rotten egg when I got here. And I'm not near as rotten. There's still little rotten pieces floating around here and there, but I'm not near as rotten as I was when I got here, as the day I got here. And it has been an absolute, it's an absolute privilege to watch a guy come this far and pick up a year. And so, Chris, happy birthday. I love you, brother. I really do. And it's a special part when you get to share a guy's life like that. When a guy calls you sponsor and trusts his deepest, darkest secrets to you. That's something unlike you. I hope you stay around till it happens, because it is absolutely what I believe we're intended to be here for. I was in my morning meditation this morning. I was reading about do not store your treasures up on earth. Keep the treasures of heaven, treasures that will pay you back when you get to heaven. And that's what this deal is all about. Is every time we pull one of these drunks out of the mire, out of the Cornell, out of the Goonie Roost, out of the the loony bin, the Zulu Center, wherever we pull them out from, wherever we pull them out from, every time we get one, and they hang on and they get active and they form the chain and they grab that next guy behind them. Man, I forget the staggering effect that one person's sobriety can have. One person. I look at my great-grand sponsor, and when we went for his 40th birthday, they said, call up everybody. They called up everybody who was sponsored by Johnny. And there was about 50 people on the stage. Okay? He was actively sponsoring 50 men with 40 years of sobriety. Okay? And then they called up the grandbabies. And that group grew to about 250. And then they called up everybody else. There were about 500 people in the audience, and there were only about 50 people left in the chairs. Because one person stayed in here and followed the simple directions in this book, which were, I will completely give myself to this program, that I am an alcoholic of a type called desperate, that I am dying of a deadly disease, and like we talked about earlier, my options are insanity or death if I live life my way. But if I live it this way, If I live it this way, look what comes to pass. Look what comes to pass. Stick around for any given period of time and see what comes to pass as a result of storing treasures in heaven by weaving this stuff into the fabric of my life. Amazing. You know? And today I was thinking along the same lines, everybody, that I absolutely love being a part of you people. And that each one of you, kind of like you and Kim were talking about on the way back home, my wife and I sit and talk about how each one of you has woven a unique thread through the fabric of our existence. Each one of you has done something that makes us go, God dang, we're just happy to be associated with you, you know. And that's not supposed to happen to drunks like me, because I drink and I destroy people's lives. I mean, that's what I do. I drink and I tear the hearts out of people. And you know. And not only have I gotten to watch my life and my relations get better, but I watch yours. And every time I watch yours, every time I watch you go through the same things, it makes me convinced that what I'm doing is right. It just absolutely reaffirms it. That's why sponsorship is so important. That's why the direction Tim talked about is so important, because I love that analogy of hiding out in the shadows. I hid in the dark places because I didn't want anybody to see the truth about me. I didn't want you to know the deep, dark, dirty sickness that lived inside me. So I hung in the back. I hung in the corners. I stayed out. I mean, I ran. I could not stand to be exposed for the fraud that I was. I couldn't stand. And my sponsor grabbed me and pulled me up and said, sit your butt right here. And you just shut up and listen for a while. And they had to treat me like that because I was off. I was rotten when I got here. And I'm so grateful that they did. I'm so grateful that they just said, sit down and be quiet for a while. You can learn right now. And you'll be better off if you just listen and learn. Thank God I didn't have to think about what I was going to say in the meeting. What brilliance I was going to bestow upon you when I got here. You know. They just let me be new. They just let me be new. You know. And they let me grow in the time that I needed, and they gave me firm direction. And they always caveat it with, if you want what we have, and you're willing to go to any length to get it, then do what we do. If you want something else, do it your way. But if you want what we have, then come do what we do. I'm glad to be here. Thanks.